Good afternoon. I'm Naomi Walker, Vice President at EPI, the Economic Policy Institute. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon's webinar to hear how fast food workers are organizing to raise wages and working standards in an industry that's known for wage theft and other widespread workers' rights violations. The California Fast Recovery Act, as you'll hear today, we'll call it AB 257, would establish a statewide fast food sector council made up of workers, employers, and state officials that would meet regularly to set industry standards on wages, hours, and other working conditions for fast food workers. The bill would help more than 550,000 workers, nearly 80% of whom are Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islanders, Black, and immigrants. Today, we're going to discuss just how the proposed sectoral councils could work to set industry-wide standards, and we'll also discuss the potential for those councils to really change the balance of power between workers and employers in fast food and beyond. In the chat, you'll soon see a link to a sign-on letter EPI was proud to organize with 40 other organizations urging the California legislature to pass AB 257. California has long been a leader on workers' rights and protections, including becoming the first state to pass a $15 minimum wage in 2016. This was a breakthrough that paved the way for states across the country to do the same, and we certainly hope that this bill will become a model for other states. AB 257 passed the California Assembly in January, and it's coming up for a full vote in the state Senate this month. So our discussion today is incredibly timely. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you today, and I'll run through their bios really quickly in the order in which you'll hear them speak. First up, we have EPI's own Jennifer Shearer, who is the Senior State Policy Coordinator for the Worker Power Project at EPI. She focuses on expanding the ability of working people to win racial, gender, and economic justice through organizing, collective bargaining, and public policies that promote workers' voice. Before she came to us at EPI, she served as the director of the University of Iowa Labor Center. Next, you'll hear from Joseph Bryant, who is the incoming Executive Vice President of the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, and he'll soon be representing over 2 million diverse members in the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico. He's currently the president of SEIU 1021, which represents Northern California workers who make schools, colleges, cities, counties, and special districts safe and healthy places to work and live and raise families. Today, we have with us Angelica Hernandez, who is a Los Angeles McDonald's worker. She's worked in the fast food industry for 18 years, and she knows all too well the challenges that workers in this sector face. She's a leader in the fight for 15 in a union, and over the past 2 days, in the 105-degree heat, Angelica led a vigil with hundreds of workers urging the California State Legislature to adopt the California Fast Recovery Act. And you'll see that she's in her car. She is tireless. She is on her way to another action in support of farm workers, and we're really glad that she was able to join us. Last but not least, originally Assembly Member Miguel Santiago, who's been a legislative champion of AB 257, was scheduled to join us, but unfortunately, legislative business called, and so Tom Steele, who is a legislative aide for Assembly Member Santiago, will be here in his stead. I will go ahead and turn it over to Jen to kick us off.
Welcome, everybody, and I am thrilled to be here to discuss the Fast Recovery Act, AB 257, at what could very well be an historic turning point for state labor policymaking with really far-reaching national implications. I'm going to share my screen and just share some brief introductory remarks, including greetings on behalf of EARN, our Economic Analysis and Research Network, of over 60 research, policy, and advocacy organizations. I know members of many of them are joining us today. and have high interest in how this relates to our Earn Worker Power project and our focus on expanding the ability of working people to achieve racial, gender, and economic justice through organizing, collective bargaining, and state and local policy change. So the Fast Recovery Act is a very significant legislative proposal for several reasons. And as Naomi mentioned, we are proud that EPI is one of many national organizations who has stepped forward in support of this legislation. For one thing, the bill recognizes the extreme imbalance of bargaining power between employers and employees in the fast food industry and proposes some concrete steps to address this power imbalance by creating a seat at the table for workers to engage as equals with employers and government agencies at the policymaking table. In a few minutes, we will be lucky to have a chance to hear more from our guests about many of the daily challenges fast food workers and their families are facing, from poverty wages to endemic wage theft, widespread violations of health and safety, harassment and discrimination laws. But why are conditions so poor? And why have they been eroding for so long? Why are violations so routine in this industry? We know, and I want to point you at this point to the many excellent unequal power papers and reports on our EPI website that document that the reason for many of these challenges is because workers have lacked power for too long, and that policies have allowed workers' power to erode. Unequal bargaining power undermines legal protections in the workplace, even those that are on the books when workers don't have the power to adequately enforce them. And unequal bargaining power generates wage stagnation, vast inequality, and systemic race and gender discrimination across our labor market and our economy. Another reason this proposed legislation is so significant is because it acknowledges that the fast food industry's franchising system is, by its very nature, structured to incentivize wage suppression and create obstacles to worker organizing. Under the current franchise system, corporate chains set most of the terms for doing business and receive most of the profits at the expense of frontline workers, as well often as the small business franchisees who operate their stores. This is one version of what David Weil has called the fissured workplace, in which a large corporate chain sets the rules, restricts resources, but then claims no responsibility for the resulting local working conditions, instead pointing to the local franchisee as the employer of legal record. So the legislation we'll be talking about today proposes very important steps to stop corporate fast food chains from using local franchisees as a buffer to let them off the hook for poverty wages, exploitative conditions, and very routine violations of a host of employment laws. And finally, this legislation is a very important acknowledgement that our federal labor law, which we know is supposed to protect the rights of private sector workers to organize, is broken. And that while we continue to press for federal labor law reform, yes, we do still need the PRO Act. In the meantime, we urgently need state and local leaders to act, to step forward. We cannot wait for federal reform. In the meantime, we will learn more today about one important model that states and cities can consider, and that is before California legislators to have the opportunity to take the lead on. So it's especially exciting today to be here to celebrate and honor the leadership and organizing of fast food workers in California who brought us to this point, presented state leaders and the governor with a huge opportunity to lead with breakthrough legislation. Fast food workers in California are over 500,000 strong. 2/3 of them are women, and 80% of them are workers of color. We also know from multiple studies, and I'm going to ask Emily to share a couple of links to those studies, just a few of the documented widespread challenges fast food workers are facing due to poverty wages and the widespread occurrence of wage theft. Some of these numbers come from very recent surveys done just in the past year, where 85% of workers are reporting that they have experienced wage theft in the recent past. Nearly half of workers have experienced a workplace injury or illness in the fast food industry in California, and nearly 1/3 report that when they have made an effort to speak up about a legal violation, they've experienced retaliation. We also know that this is representative of a serious industry-wide problem. This is not limited to California. Fast food companies are organized on the franchise model to drive down wages, and as a result, this affects local labor markets across the country. So the other invitation I want to issue is for folks to familiarize yourselves with Economic Policy Institute's new company wage tracker, where you can see results from major national worker surveys at fast food chains, including McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell, and many others, of the wages that result from this model across the country. So what would AB 257 do? It would take steps toward addressing unequal power and bringing workers to the table with employers, franchisors, and franchisees, and state agencies to set enforceable wages and standards. These are just a few of the components of the bill. And I will also invite Emily at this point to share the link to the legislation itself, because I know we have many people in the audience who will be curious to read the text of the legislation. The Recovery Act, Fast Recovery Act, would create a 13-member sector council with the authority to issue statewide standards on wages, working conditions, and training adequate to ensure and maintain the welfare of fast food restaurant employees. I think that's powerful language. And the council would also have the authority to recommend to California Occupational Safety and Health Standards Board health and safety standards to be adopted under their existing authority. The other important intervention that this legislation would make is creating accountability for corporate chains, addressing the fissured workplace problems that the franchise model creates. So the council would have the authority to take wages out of competition by setting a statewide floor, along with statewide standards to level the playing field, so that franchisors are not in the position of continually creating downward pressure on wages and conditions. And it includes legal pathways to making franchisors responsible for ensuring that their local franchisees both comply and have the resources to comply with all employment, health, and safety laws. They would bear, unlike in the present, they would begin to bear joint liability for any worker rights violations that occur. And the legislation also includes new protections against the very common experience of retaliation that workers now commonly face when they bring forward instances of legal violations. So I want to stop there. I want to hand it off to our guests who truly are right now in the midst of the culmination of years of organizing, of building the, developing this policy proposal and creating the public awareness and collective power to bring it to a vote. So thank you for joining us, and I am eagerly looking forward to hearing what our friends and in California have to share with us. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jen. And next we'll turn it over to Joseph Bryant.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you, Jen. And I'd like to start just by thanking the EPI team for hosting this absolutely critical conversation about this important legislation that's just vital to working families here in California, AB 257, the Fast Recovery Act. And as Naomi and Jen touched on, if we pass this bill, AB 257 will impact over 500,000 fast food workers in the state of California. And what it truly does is it gives them a voice, and not just a voice, but it also gives them a seat at the table to improve their lives and the lives of their families. And just to take a small step back for a little background, you know, over the last 10 years, fast food workers have been fiercely organizing their shops. They've been going out on courageous strikes and speaking out to raise their wages. And they've also been advocating to create safe working conditions and to create a table that can fix this broken industry. And to put this in perspective, in just the last 2 years, more than 2,000 fast food workers in California have taken action or have gone on strike in over 350 locations. They've also filed over 300 wage and safety complaints with the state against this industry. And this is an industry, again, where workers are called essential, where workers have been essential and stepped up in some of the toughest times that we've dealt with. But to have to deal with rampant wage theft, to have to deal with sexual harassment, to have to deal with wages that make it impossible to support a family in California is the conditions that they've been dealing with. There's a recent survey done where it said 85% of workers have experienced at least one form of wage theft, 85%. And we're also dealing with an industry and companies that say they stand for racial justice and the fight against inequality. But at the same time, they profit off the backs of workers that are comprised 80% of people of color, 2/3 of the workforce is women, and allow this exploitation to take place at the same time that they say they're fighting for these justices. But to truly understand what workers are going through and why we need to fix this broken industry, I'd like to introduce a leader in this fight, Angelica Hernandez. And Angelica has worked for McDonald's for over 16 years, has been a leader in the fight, in the fight for 15 for over 5 years. And I'd like to pass it over to Angelica to share her experiences and the experiences of her coworkers. Angelica.
Sí, pues buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Angélica y pues trabajo en McDonald y soy la líder de la lucha por 15 y un sindicato. Y pues...
Hello, everyone. My name is Angelica Hernandez. And yes, I currently work at McDonald's and I'm a leader with the Fight for 15 in a union.
Y pues les pido una disculpa si se llega a cortar porque vamos en camino, porque de Sacramento hemos trabajado duro estos días porque queremos que pasen pues la AB 257.
And so apologies if my signal isn't the best. We're actually on our way to another event. We've been working tirelessly, going to different events and holding different events in order to get AB 257 passed.
Es muy importante este bill para nosotros los trabajadores, porque pues a mí me han robado el salario por 7, 8 años, yo no sabía. Soy sobreviviente pues de acoso sexual y pues no es justo que McDonald esté haciendo esto con nosotros los trabajadores.
And it's so crucial for this bill to pass because in my personal experience, I've experienced wage theft. I experienced that for 7 years. While working for McDonald's, I've also experienced sexual harassment. And these are just a few of the issues that are happening and going on within our entire industry.
Ahora con la pandemia, yo fui la primera que salía a huelga para exigir que nos dieran la protección que tanto estamos pidiendo en ese tiempo, porque no teníamos ninguna protección, no teníamos ni recogedores para recoger la basura, la recogíamos con un cartón.
And so now with the pandemic, I was the first to go on strike for the protections that we've been asking for so long. They weren't providing us any type of protections during COVID. They weren't even giving us anything to sweep the floor, like a dustpan or anything. We had to use our hands to clean the floors.
Por eso este bill para nosotros es bien importante, porque no es justo que McDonald's nos dé un aumento de 10 centavos cada 6 meses, mientras que sus managers ganan bonos cada 3 meses de $300 y $400.
And for this reason, this bill is so important. Another thing, it's not fair for McDonald's and these companies to just give us a 10-cent raise every now and then. Meanwhile, their executives, even managers are making hundreds of dollars, if not more, bonuses.
Por eso yo estoy alzando mi voz. Para los que no salen a alzar la voz porque tienen miedo por las represalias que nos hacen, porque nos quitan días y horas, pero a mí no me importa, yo sigo luchando porque este bill va a ser bien importante para nosotros.
This is why I'm raising my voice for those others who are too afraid to speak up for fear of retaliation, because they have taken away some of our days and our hours for speaking up. But I don't care, because I know the importance of this bill and needing it to get passed.
Somos 500,000 de trabajadores que estamos pidiendo este bill para no tener que estar sufriendo en nuestro trabajo, que seamos humillados, pisoteados, haciéndonos trabajar por 2, 3 personas, y yo nomás me llevo un cheque a mi casa, no me llevo ni 2 ni 3.
You know, we are more than 500,000 workers, and we are fighting so that we no longer have to keep getting, being humiliated and being looked down upon by our bosses, making us work 2 to 3, the job of 2 to 3 people, and yet I only come home with one check, one salary.
Y también pues las generaciones que vienen atrás de nosotros no sufran lo que estamos sufriendo. A mí mi hijo me dijo, ma, méteme a trabajar contigo. Le dije, no, mi hijo, yo no te meto a trabajar contigo porque yo no quiero ver que te estén haciendo lo que yo estoy viviendo. Por eso quiero ganar esta ley, para que los que vienen atrás de nosotros tengan un trabajo digno.
And, we're also fighting for other generations so they don't suffer. My son asked me to let him work with me at McDonald's. And I said, no way. I don't want you to experience what I've had to go through. And so this is why we're fighting for them, for the next generation, so that my son and others don't have to work in these types of conditions.
Estos días que yo he estado luchando, estamos luchando duros todos los que estamos ahorita en Sacramento. Soy una líder que me quedé afuera del Capitolio a dormir. No dormí nada porque esa emoción de que vamos a ganar este bill.
And we are fighting hard. We were over in Sacramento, and I was one of the leaders who actually camped outside the Capitol building. I didn't sleep at all because I'm so excited. I have so much hope that this bill is going to pass.
Y ver cuando llegamos al Capitolio a hacer lobby y ver cómo los dueños de corporaciones, de restaurantes, están balconeándonos a nosotros los trabajadores en vez de pagarnos y darnos lo que estamos pidiendo.
And then also seeing when we arrived and in Sacramento at the Capitol, and we're going around lobbying, telling our stories, and just seeing how so many corporations and other special interests have this vendetta to go against us versus wanting to join us, wanting for us to have better working conditions.
Están pagando porque un avión esté poniendo arriba en el cielo que no ave 257 y traer un carro dando vueltas afuera del Capitolio que no ave 257, eso me da más fuerzas para seguir luchando para pasar este bill.
They actually paid for an airplane to fly and send a message with a message saying no to AB 257. They paid for a car to go around with a sign that said AB 257. And this made me angry and want to fight even harder for us.
Porque a ellos no les importa sus trabajadores, a ellos les importa las ganancias, porque cuántos trabajadores ahora con COVID están malos que no pueden trabajar, están en sillas de ruedas. Es triste que McDonald, cualquier corporación de comida rápida, no les importen sus trabajadores, nada más quieren ganancias y ganancias.
This just shows, it's proof that they don't care about us workers. They only care about making money. Just think about how many workers and fellow colleagues suffered from COVID. Many are still recovering from COVID, and yet McDonald's and so many other corporations have done nothing to help them.
Por eso este bill para nosotros es importante, porque es un paso bien grande a llegar al sindicato, porque el día que yo me retire, no tengo nada ahorita, no voy a tener mi retiro. ¿Cómo voy a vivir? ¿De limosnas? Porque no tengo un futuro sin al retirarme. Por eso les doy las gracias a ustedes por estar escuchándonos y apoyándonos.
And so I really have the belief and the hope that AB 257 not only will pass, but it will be the next step toward us getting a union, because I think of when I retire, I'll have nothing. You know, how will I pay for my living? I will retire after so many years of work with nothing. And so I thank you all for your support and for listening to me and understanding the importance of passing this bill.
Porque todos los que andamos ahorita andamos cansados, ya creo que sin voz, y ahorita vamos a apoyar a nuestros compañeros del campo, porque ellos mismos están viviendo lo mismo que nosotros, nada más en su trabajo, que es en el campo. Por eso, a echarle para adelante, y muchas gracias a ustedes por apoyarnos.
And so we're also continuing our fight and continuing our support for other workers. Right now, we're on our way for an event to support farm workers, because we understand the importance of every service worker, every worker having a job with dignity and respect. And so thank you all for also believing in us.
Great. Thank you so much, Angelica, and thank you, Brenda, for interpreting for us. Really helpful. We stand in solidarity with you all, and at the end of this conversation, we'll talk a little bit about how folks on the call can be helpful in this fight. Next up, I'd like to turn it over to Tom Steele.
And a special thank you to the EPI team for bringing all these and all the organizations on this call for supporting AB 257 and what it means for fast food workers throughout California. Assemblymember Santiago expresses his sincere regret for not being able to attend the call today, but as a proud co-author, he has been out fighting for AB 257 and doing everything he can to try and push it over the finish line. And one thing that I think is incredibly important that a bunch of folks have commented on the call thus far is AB 257 means an opportunity to create workplaces with dignity throughout California. When we listen to Angelica talk about wage theft and retaliation, folks not even having the proper PPE to protect themselves from COVID, that is not a workplace with dignity. That is not a workplace with proper protections. And so what AB 257 will do is help provide a way for workers, for corporations, for franchise owners, and the government to identify these problems and come to solutions that will help benefit fast food workers across the entire industry. That is incredibly important for a fast food workforce that is majority female and majority people of color. And the government has an opportunity here to step in to help level the playing field and raise the working standards for all workers throughout the entire fast food industry. And so, again, special thank you to the EPI team and all of the organizations on this call. We need to continue these conversations with our senators and with the governor to eventually get this bill signed into law. So again, special thank you to you all from Assemblymember Santiago. Now let's keep the fight up for AB 257. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tom, and please give our regards to Assemblymember Santiago. Appreciate his leadership on this bill. Okay, so we are at the question and answer portion of our discussion today, and I see that there are 2 questions have already come in, and we will tackle those. But please, for all the advocates on the call, if you have questions that you would like to share with our panelists, please do go ahead and drop those in. First question up is coming in from Peter. What sort of standards could the sector council issue in relation to working conditions? Could it include things like advanced schedule notice and compensation for canceled shifts? Who would like to tackle that? Talk a little bit more about the kind of working conditions that the bill covers.
I can jump in. Yeah, I can jump in on that, Naomi. What the bill would cover and what the council would cover is, again, it's a broad range of different issues and concerns that workers can bring to the table. So whether it be in regards to wages, whether it be in regards to safety conditions, whether it be in regards to still dealing with the pandemic, accessibility to PPE, it really would give that place and space to be able to uplift those things, and also give opportunity again to talk about what makes this work for workers in terms of how to have stability around hours. So it does give quite a bit of space, and also again in terms of creating standards around safety. It's something that we've seen from so many fast food workers, where we've seen a rise in assaults take place, even more so recently, and to be able to uplift those concerns, uplift those issues that workers are facing, and come up with solutions to be able to address them.
Great, thank you so much, Joseph. Anybody else want to chime in on that one? Jen?
I'll just add that in terms of the specific question about scheduling, my understanding is that the short answer is a resounding yes, that is an area in which the council will have latitude to act. And in terms of the legal framework within which this bill has been developed, as many folks know, federally, our labor law preempts states from changing the rules about how workers can organize and form a union. So the council will not have latitude or authority to set new rules or regulations in that arena. However, states have broad latitude in setting and regulating various kinds of employment laws. And that certainly extends to wages, setting a new floor for the industry on a statewide basis, certainly extends to things like scheduling. And then one of the reasons that the council will not be directly setting health and safety standards, but will be recommending health and safety standards, is that there is another existing state agency, California OSHA, that does have that legal authority. And so the concept is that those agencies will be working hand in hand, but with far more robust input directly from workers who are experts on their experiences, experts on the hazards and challenges that they're facing, and with broader public input. Because the other thing that we haven't talked about that the bill does is provide the option for cities and localities to establish their own local councils to work hand in hand with the state standards board, and it requires the state board to regularly hear public input and review the standards that have been set and their effectiveness. So I think all of those components together show the sort of thoughtful nature in which this legislation has been crafted to work within existing legal frameworks and to create some significant space and authority for workers to engage directly in the policy and rulemaking process.
Thanks, Jen. I'm going to move us on to the next question that came in from one of the participants who, like Angelica, expressed concerns about the employers fighting tooth and nail to push back and not reach agreement with workers on these issues. And so what happens if at the table the negotiations aren't able to achieve, either negotiations break down or it's not able to achieve the kind of wins for workers that we want to see?
I can jump in on that, Naomi. One, I think, again, just in terms of the thoughtfulness of putting the legislation together where it does include workers It does include, franchise operators. It does include government. It is certainly a body that was created with equity in mind to allow for conversations to take place to determine, what makes most sense. I think the part of the hope is to say that what will be advocated for, again, includes workers, includes the operators, but it also includes the neutral body of the state that will also be able to weigh in. I think at the end of the day, again, just even having a space to have those conversations, and we have confidence also that when we talk about these stories, like what Angelica just shared, when we talk about the stories that Angelica's coworkers have expressed and have lived through, we feel confident that the right decisions will be made from the council.
Great, thank you so much. On to the next question. Sorry, I'm going through. Okay, what can investors, including those outside of the U.S., do to support AB 257?
I'll jump in again, Naomi. And thank you for the tee up of the person who asked the question. So right now, where we're at in the process is we've passed it through the state assembly. We've just passed it through the appropriations within Senate. It'll go up to the Senate floor, likely early to mid next week. And now is the time to reach out to senators, whether in district or if you want to advocate as a person that this is important to, even if you're out of district, to let them know how important this is for you, how important this is for workers. And that decision will be made with the Senate, sometime next week. After it passes the Senate, which we're hoping again happens mid next week, they have to have concurrence between the Assembly and the Senate. And then once that's signed, it'll go to the governor's desk where he has 30 days to sign that bill in September. So there will be opportunities. The first thing here and now, reaching out to senators, and I believe we have a landing page where it can connect you directly to senators. It's I think we're going to post the website in the chat, I'm hoping. But it'll allow you to connect directly with the senator, let them know why this is important to you. Also, please use your social media handles. Please retweet this stream or any aspects of this stream to really get the message out. And we're using the hashtag AB275 or 257, excuse me. So there are many ways to do it, but however you can use your microphone to get it out via social media, calling friends, reaching out to legislators, please do so.
Great. Thank you so much. And you alluded a little bit to needing to reach out to the governor as well. Do you want to say a little bit more about where he is on the bill now?
Sure. And really our focus is to make sure that we can get it to his desk, which is to get it through the Senate next week. But we are confident, as somebody, who stands up for workers, will eventually support and sign off on AB 257 once it passes through the Senate and Assembly. So as more comes with that, we will make sure to continue to let folks know how they can advocate and help support.
Great. Thank you so much. A question came in, I'm going to sort of combine it, about would it be beneficial for other states to adopt legislation like this? I will say yes. And then the question, another question, similar question is, where else is this being considered? Jen?
Yeah, this might be a time to jump back in with, I have one last image that I didn't share earlier, which has a brief list of a few examples. And then I will also share a couple links in the chat that we haven't put up yet. So there are both significant historical and legal precedents for wage and standards boards to be used to lift standards across a sector or across an industry. And we also are seeing a new wave of 21st century initiatives, some of them local, and in part of the very significant development in California is that this is now a statewide piece of legislation that's being considered. In Seattle, the Seattle Office of Labor Standards has already for several years had a domestic workers standards board in place. New York City has already used a wage board process in order to accelerate and lift wages for fast food workers specifically, just within the jurisdiction of New York City. So that example has shown some success. Detroit, Michigan, just in the last few months, has passed a new industry standards board ordinance, which workers are continuing to organize to put into motion. And the other example that is relatively recent, but very significant, covering hundreds of thousands of workers potentially in Harris County, Texas, is a new essential workers standards board that the county level has adopted. So we've got several examples from around the country, and I will also put in the chat a couple of links to articles that go into more detail, both about the historical legal precedents for the use of wage boards to set industry-wide standards, and a second article that goes into some detail about AB 257 and the precedent in California for standard setting boards to operate in a similar fashion.
Great, thank you, Jen. I want to pull in a couple of the questions that came in around the franchisees because I think that's an interesting question. First one before we get to that though is, will the legislation cover fast casual restaurant chains as well? We can come back to that one if we want to dig in on franchisees. Okay. One of the questions came in, could the panel speak more to how the legislation will address franchisees and how major brands use them as a cover to avoid responsibility? And then sort of as part of that question, pulling in another one, how are franchisors as well as franchisees held responsible for decisions made by the Fast Food Council? This question is, how would they be held responsible? Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of very specific things in the bill that would change the legal obligations of franchisors, the corporate fast food chains. So the bill makes franchisors responsible for complying with the standards that are set by the state sectoral council. And it also provides franchisees a legal pathway if something in the franchisor's agreement or a restriction of resources has prevented the local franchisee from complying with wage rates or standards. It provides a pathway to legal action for the franchisee to say, you must provide the resources or change the agreement so that I can comply with these standards. And then the other thing it does is create joint employer liability for violations of employment laws or standards that are set by the state. So if workers experience a violation, right now, the franchisee is legally typically considered solely liable, even though we know the franchisor, the corporate chain, is often calling the shots and setting the conditions that are leading to the violations on the ground. So the bill would do those three things and create liability for the franchisor if violations are being reported as well.
And just to take on your previous question, Naomi, so the standards would apply to any chain that has at least 30 stores nationwide. So I guess it just depends on the size of the chain in terms of its application.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Okay, I think, sorry, give me 1 second. Oh, good question. How might this relate to unionization of fast food workers or some sort of worker representation and financing for workers' organization? From Steve Herzenberg from Keystone.
So I think, one of the things that the legislation does is it breaks down the silos that exist between all the franchisees, and it brings workers together. And it brings them all together under the umbrella of the council. That in itself certainly would allow workers to collectively, come together and think about, organizing as it makes sense, within the industry. So I think just creating the space where you have worker representatives, workers will be talking to, advocating to their representatives on the council. It brings what organizing workers is about, bringing workers together, and gives space to be able to consider how to, organize at different scales within the industry.
Great.
And I'm wondering if it's possible that we could go back to Angelica's mention of the hope of a pathway to unionizing and pose that question to her as well.
Mm-hmm.
Brenda.
Ms. Brenda, yeah. Brenda, are you able to ask Angelica about how the work that's being done on AB 257 might also help provide a path to unionization?
Angelica, alguien pregunta de cómo esta legislación podría ayudarles a ustedes en su industria a obtener un sindicato, como lo habías mencionado antes. ¿Puedes hablar un poco de eso?
We might have lost.
Sí, sí, Brenda.
Mm-hmm.
Sí, puedes hablar.
Sí. ¿Me puedes repetir la pregunta, por favor?
Preguntan, como habías dicho antes, ¿cómo quizás ayudará esta legislación a ustedes en la comida rápida obtener un sindicato, una unión?
Ok. Primero que nada les pido disculpas porque se está cortando. Y pues esta ley nos beneficiaría a los trabajadores a tener una silla en la mesa.
Says apologies that my connection isn't the best, but this legislation would create that pathway toward a union. First of all, it would give us a seat at the table, something that we do not have at the moment.
Thank you, Brenda. And if Angelica comes back on, we're happy to pull her in for this last bit here. I have one other question that I want to add in, just because we talked so much about employer opposition. Somebody specifically named National Restaurant Association and how they would likely be a significant player in this battle, and what is being done to sort of moderate their influence. And can anything be done to moderate their influence?
A good question. I think part of how we've approached it, particularly since it's in the state legislature, is to create space for the state legislatures to, hear from Angelica, hear from other workers within the industry about, you have to make a decision at some point in time. You either are going to support workers, or you're going to support businesses and the associations. But it is the people like Angelica, like all of us, who put these electeds in office and to advocate on behalf of workers. And that's really been our approach, our reminder, our push. They're going to spend as much money as needed to try to suppress workers. And what our role has been is to continue to uplift the voices of workers through this process.
Thank you. A question came in. Sorry, just one second. From Daniel Keene, who would love to hear more about how the local boards set up by cities and counties would interact with the state level board, if possible.
So a little bit of detail to add is that the language in the bill designates counties or cities with a population of over 200,000 as the category of localities that can establish local fast food sector councils. And really, I think the intended focus for the local councils is to be a body that, like the state council, assembles workers, franchisors, franchisees, and local agency officials for the purpose of local standard setting. And I can even copy a bit of this language into the chat for those who are interested. And of course, the local standard setting can't be in conflict or undercutting what the state board creates, but can complement or exceed what the state body has addressed. And I don't know if other folks have more to add on that score.
Great. Okay, if nothing to add, I'm gonna move us to our last question, which is aimed at our speakers in California, Joseph and Angelica. I'm not sure, I think we might have lost Tom. But given that this thing could be voted on in the next month, Joseph, I wonder if you just might want to reiterate what folks that are listening can do to be helpful in this last push to try to get this thing to the governor's desk.
Absolutely. I would say, and thank you again for the question. The first thing that is going to be most important, given the fact that it's going to be on the Senate floor, is to reach out to your state senators. And we do have a website set up. You don't know necessarily who your state senator is. If you go to fightfor15.org/call AB257, it will actually bring up that information and connect you directly with your senator. So, if you do have a direct line for your senators, please make those calls. Also amplifying it through social media. So if you can tweet about this streaming broadcast, if you can lift up the many articles that were laid out by the team, it would absolutely help just amplify and really put the pressure on legislators to call the question. Hey, are you going to support multinational corporations, or are you going to support workers? And I think Emily just dropped in a couple of the hashtags we've been using. Hashtag CA-Ledge, hashtag AB257, at Fight415 LA, at Fight415 Northern California, NorCal, Fight415.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to thank all of our speakers, Jen, Joseph, Angelica, and Tom. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for the work that you're doing to drive this legislation forward. If there's anything we can do to be helpful at EPI in this final push, please do let us know. We would really like to see this be a model across the country. As always, for folks joining us, if you want to follow EPI on any of the social channels, Twitter, Facebook, Insta, you can follow us at Economic Policy. So I hope you do that. I am happy to try and give, I'm not sure if Angelica can hear us, but give Angelica the final word about how important this legislation is and what we can be doing to support workers. So Brenda, could you translate for Angelica?
Angélica, quisiéramos poder terminar o culminar esta llamada escuchando de usted. Primero, gracias por su participación en esta llamada y queremos saber, terminar la llamada con usted diciendo un poco de la importancia de pasar esta ley y de cómo la gente le puede ayudar, apoyar.
Ok, pues para mí y para el 500,000 de trabajadores es importante esta ley para tener una silla en la mesa con McDonald o las compañías con las que trabajamos, para tener los estándares que tanto deseamos tener.
And thank you all, and from us and the 500,000 fast food workers around California, this bill is so important to pass because it'll finally give us, as I mentioned, that seat at the table with McDonald's and other corporations in order to have better policies that we are currently fighting for.
Y tener un trabajo digno para no estar sufriendo lo que estamos sufriendo ahorita. Por eso yo ahorita ando alzando mi voz en todos los lugares que se pueda para ser escuchada.
And to be able to have a say in getting better and more dignified jobs, so we don't have to keep suffering the way that we're suffering right now. And that's why I'm raising my voice and continue to raise my voice anywhere and anywhere that I can.
Great.
¿Y,
Well,
cómo me pueden apoyar, ayudar? A ustedes hablando con sus senadores, con sus legisladores, con el gobernador, que nos apoyen a pasar este bill, y a la comunidad que se una a nosotros, no yendo a ir a comprar un día a los restaurantes para que vean la pérdida que va a haber por no apoyarnos a nosotros. Y muchas gracias y les pido disculpas porque se estuvo cortando.
And so, and speaking and talking about how everyone can join us in our fight, please reach out to your senators, legislators, and talk about the importance of passing this bill, and the community can stand by us and with us when we go on strikes, when we take action, and show these companies how important it is for them to treat workers with respect and give us a voice on the job. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the participants.